Hello, everybody, and welcome to another bonus episode of the Walt Disney Q&A. This is the series in which you throw me questions about anything Disney-related, the parks, the cartoons, the movies, the merchandise, and I try to answer them as much as I can. I called this a bonus episode because typically on Wednesdays I have a creative series, but that's on hiatus while we sort out the details. In a couple of weeks or so, it should be coming back. But in the meantime, let's explore the Grand Floridian Resort here on MC Magic and answer some of your questions about Disney. First one this week comes from East Coast Railroad Videos, who's a regular asker, and he asks, I always hear questions about what if Walter Michael Eisner were still around. Eisner's still around. He's just not. He's just not at Disney. He's still kicking. But what if Roy was still around? Thanks. Of course, he's talking about Roy Disney, the brother of Walt. I assume you mean Roy's brother, not his nephew. I mean, regardless of whichever Roy you're talking of, I think the answer is they'd be retired. Roy's brother, Walt's brother, Roy specifically, he wasn't a very creative person, and I don't mean to say that in any sort of insulting way. He was the businessman, and he was really good at what he did. But I think he and Walt realized that they were both two sides of one coin that made the company what it was. And without one, the other would sort of just, is missing that part of the balance. In fact, Roy was planning to retire while Walt was still around and there at Disney, and then unfortunately Walt passed away, and Roy eventually pushed back his plans to retire in order to get the first phase of the Florida project done. So, I mean, even when he was still alive, there were, you listen to the band play, that's cool. Even when he was still alive, he had plans to leave, so I think if he was still around, he probably wouldn't be involved with the company. Same thing with Walt's nephew, Roy's son, Roy. He was with the company for many years after his father and his uncle died, but he eventually sort of fell back and had less and less of a role as he got older. And he wasn't very involved with the company's business itself. It was interesting. Roy was very much involved in getting Eisner and Wells in charge, and then getting Eisner kicked out when he wanted Iger in charge. But as far as the day-to-day, he wasn't very involved with the company. Let's go up to some of these rooms here. Great question, though. Thanks for asking. Sean Blue Revamped asks, what do you think of Disney purchasing Maker Studios? Does this hint towards Disney leaking into the internet and trying to dominate the world of the web? Are you partnered, possibly with Maker Studios, or a partnership program owned by Maker Studios? Was this the right move for Disney? What could have possibly prompted them to do this? You seemed very confused. So yeah, they bought Maker Studios, the YouTube studio, for, what was it? It was like $500 million with an additional $450 potential million in performance bonuses. That's an insane amount of money to buy a YouTube company with. Just to get the easy questions out of the way, I'm not partnered with Maker or any partnership at the moment, actually. So everything I say is totally free of bias. Why do I think they did it? I'm not 100% sure. It's a very interesting question because there's no clear answer, but I think it's a good thing either way, because what it shows is that Disney is not treating the internet and web video as an enemy to their classic business model. What they're doing is they're saying, okay, this is the future, we need to get on it, and they're getting on it by buying a studio, which is what Iger does, right? He bought Marvel, he bought Lucasfilm. He buys talent that's already there rather than cultivating it from the ground up. How they're gonna change what they do, if they change what they do at all, is a great question I don't know the answer to. I think it could be many things. I mean, I don't think they're going to affect what people under Maker Studios banner do. I don't think they're going to say, hey, Shay Carl, you need to start talking about Disney now. I think what it's more like is maybe Shay Carl will get a free trip to Disney World to go show off New Fantasyland, stuff like that. Also, you have to remember, YouTube runs ads on their video, and partners or partnership programs, you know, those networks are tasked with going out and making ad deals. Now, let's think about that. What if Disney, one, they get ad revenue, sure, if when they need to, but when they don't need to, they could just run their own ads, theoretically. For instance, maybe now every video under Maker Studios, once Frozen 2 comes along, if that's to ever happen, you know, you start seeing banners on all these YouTube videos that hundreds of millions of people are watching. You start seeing Frozen 2 ads, and rather than having to pay for it, you know, it's part of their network, you know. And that's a completely hypothetical. I don't know. Maybe that's not what's going to happen. There's only time will tell. It's a very interesting moment because it's just great to see one of the, if not the largest entertainment company in the world, acknowledge the presence of web video by purchasing a studio, as opposed to, you know, trying to shut it down or, you know, work around it or come up with, you know, ways to lock their content out of those mediums. So I'm all for it. You know, I'm interested to see how it works out. Let's go to this building. Sam and Melvin ask, has Walt Disney himself ever been featured in any ride or attraction at any of the parks? And also, do you think this would have been a good idea? Do you think this should have happened? Let's warp to Hollywood Studios. So, in a ride, technically speaking, no. As far as I've looked into it a little more, off the top of my head, I didn't think so. And upon researching it, I didn't see any. There's no like Walt in a ride. There are two places that I know of where you can kind of consider it. The first, as somebody mentioned in the comments, there's One Man's Dream, which isn't a ride, but it is an attraction. It is sort of a walk-through museum dedicated to Walt Disney, and it's here in the Hollywood Studios. We'll walk our way towards it. And it's all about him and his life. So tons of information, tons of things from his like childhood. I think like his school desk is in there. Little projects he worked on before he became, you know, the famous Uncle Walt, all sorts of stuff. And then it sort of ends with a mini documentary that you sit in and watch about Walt himself. So if you're interested in learning more about Walt Disney and, you know, besides reading some awesome biographies, you could also check that out. Now, the other place where you can see Walt isn't really an attraction, it's a restaurant, and it is the Sci-Fi Dine-In Theater. Now, I almost missed this, but the other day I was sort of listening to the loop because I'm a giant nerd, and when the weather's nice, I like to listen to some of these loops to get in the spirit. And actually, the Sci-Fi Dine-In loop that plays on the screen includes a short hosted by Walt Disney, so you can see Walt Disney there. But should he be in the rides themselves? I don't know. As famous as he was, and as much as people recognized him, I don't think his goal was to ever, you know, egotistically insert himself into what he worked on. So, especially now at this point, I feel like there's no benefit. I think something like the One Man's Dream tribute to Walt is a much more fitting and respectful way to go about it. But that was a great question. Question of the week for me, as far as I'm concerned. I think that was awesome. Lunar Distortion asks, hey Rob, see this is the sign-in, the Sci-Fi Dine-In Theater. Lunar Distortion asks, hey Rob, what are your thoughts on the new remodeling of Downtown Disney, Disney Springs, and what do you think they should do with it? So if you haven't heard the news, they are going to, over the course of a couple of years, be remodeling Downtown Disney into an area called Disney Springs, and it is essentially going to be the same in content, which is to say it'll be a lot of dining and shopping and that sort of stuff that Downtown Disney has always offered. But it will... Ooh, I see a doctor. But it will also have a new theme. It'll have a new aesthetic look. And I personally think why they went about doing this is, you know, Downtown Disney was just sort of like the sporadic mix of different things, and it never had a unified theme. The closest they ever came was to Pleasure Island, and they eventually closed that down. So I felt like they wanted to probably stick with the Disney spirit of creating these backstories and giving them to areas, and I think that's what they're doing with Disney Springs, and I think it's a great idea, and I think they should keep it that way. Downtown Disney has an amazing purpose, Press once, hop in. We're going to ride Star Tours. And I like that we passed Chewbacca on our way. I think it has its purpose. I think they should keep it food and entertainment. I just think making it this unified theme is a great idea. So I'm looking forward to it. Jacob Schmidt asks, I just want to say you do a great job. Thank you. And I was wondering if you have ever gone during any special events at the parks. I'm going in 2 weeks and I'm excited for the Flower and Garden event. Just wondering if you have a favorite event to go to while you're there. Keep up the good work. Thanks, Jacob. I have been during a couple. When I was much younger, I was there towards the tail ends of Christmas. I was actually after Christmas Day, but all of the stuff was still up, so it sort of had that Christmas feel. I've been there for New Year's because that's why I was going at that time. And I've been there for Halloween, and that was pretty fun because I did the Not So Scary Halloween, which is an extra add-on event you have to sort of pay for, but I think it was well worth the price because you get the Hollow Wishes, you get the Not So Scary Parade, you get people all in costume, and you can trick-or-treat and stuff, so it's a lot of fun. New Year's was fantastic because I was actually there for the turn of the century, going into 2000 from 99, and that was insane because back then, if you're old enough to remember, you know, there was all of this fear that in retrospect was really silly about Y2K, and which was this idea that all the computers would freak out and break down because of the date change. So there were a lot of generators there just in case, and it was super packed because, of course, it's the turn of the century, turn of the millennium. I was in Epcot in World Showcase in Italy, and it was just really fantastic. I was a lot younger back then, but I have really fond memories of it, and it was a fireworks show that I to this day have not forgotten. It was unlike any other fireworks show I've ever seen. It still has not been matched. So that was my favorite by far. Spring and Garden, one I can't really enjoy very much because I have crazy allergies. Food and Wine is one that I'm hoping that I will be able to actually experience this year because I'm looking to go in the fall. And being, you know, older now, for one, I can enjoy the wine, and two, I think I'd have a better appreciation for the food. But I think top of that list has to be New Year's. Next up, we have Dylan Lydell, who asks, I've heard that Disney has bought Minecraft. They also have so far added a Marvel skin pack on the Xbox 360, and also a Fantasy and City texture packs on the Xbox. What are your thoughts? What do you think the Disney company might add or take away from Minecraft? Thanks, and have a magical day. I'm not sure where you heard that rumor, but that's not the case. Disney has not bought Minecraft. I don't think they've attempted to. I know Notch is very independently minded, so I wouldn't see him ever selling it, to be 100% honest. Are we stuck here? Okay, we're unstuck now. Yeah, they didn't buy it. I don't think Notch would sell it. There is a Marvel skin pack, and I think there's another question here that I will jump to now because it's slightly related, and that is not here. Okay, maybe I answered it in the comments. I think their question was, would they do others skin packs since they did Marvel? And yeah, it's, you know, it's up to whatever deal they strike for that sort of thing. But I don't see Disney owning Minecraft anytime soon. Nicholas Vanderveen asks, there are rumors going around that there will be a new Star Wars land at Hollywood Studios. If this is true, what attractions do you think will be removed or replaced? Great question, Nicholas. So these rumors are abound, and you know, with a new trilogy in the way and then more movies in between the trilogy, I would put my money that we're going to see a Star Wars land in Hollywood Studios. Now, where will it be? Good question. Now, I think logically you think Star Tours is over here, so you would put it somewhere around here just to blend it in with Star Tours. And then the question is, what do you take out? Well, that'd be like the Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular, which would be a shame to lose. And then there's an eatery back there, and then you can expand outwards. I mean, if you're doing a whole new land, it might be worth just paying the money to build the infrastructure to just expand the park. Now, that said, on this side of the park, you've got the Light Motors Stunts Action Show, and you have the Backlot Tour, two attractions that take up quite a lot of space for just the two attractions. So I also would be not surprised to see if they remove those 2 attractions and replace them with a Star Wars area. Again, also kind of a shame because I like the backlot tour, but again, and then maybe even the Honey I Shrunk the Kids playset. Like these 3, like this whole chunk of the park is like 3 attractions that take up so much space. And I think if you're thinking logically, you know, if you could put 4, maybe even 5 attractions in this area, then, you know, you got a stew going. Next up, we have Hoffman Studios, who asks, Rob, do you think that Disney should make a new Muppets ride and keep the Muppets 3D vision? P.S. You're the best. Thanks. Do I think they should? Sure. If they're doing more Muppet movies, which I imagine they would, I think the Muppet movies are doing pretty well, then it would make sense to do, and they own the Muppets now, so they could do that. What sort of ride they would do is completely, I have no idea, and I can't even begin to imagine. I enjoy the Muppets, but I'm not a huge enough Muppets fan to, you know, have a idea in the back of my head like the Tron roller coaster. Please make the Tron roller coaster. You could put it in Rock and Roller Coaster where that was. That'd be a good place to put it, Disney. Just please make it. But yeah, they could do that. And in the meantime, they should also update the Muppet Vision 3D because it's kind of old. This is my username, clever username, asks, as you have mentioned many times before that Epcot is your favorite park, I was wondering what's your least favorite park and why? His is personally the Magic Kingdom, only because it's sort of childish and super crowded. Well, the Magic Kingdom is very crowded because it is very popular. I wouldn't call it very childish. I think, you know, it appeals to the child in everybody, and I think these other parks do that. I'd be afraid of a park that sort of just tried to be extreme. You know, there were always rumors of an extreme fifth park with just all roller coasters and stuff, and I would have really disliked that idea because that's not what Disney's about. The whole premise of Disney is that it's supposed to be Disneyland was supposed to be a park where adults and kids can enjoy it equally. People of all ages. Now, to answer your question, my least favorite park probably would have to be the Animal Kingdom, and I think partially that's due to a difference in development. There aren't a whole lot of attractions in general. I'm not a huge fan of nature, as I've mentioned before. I have some pretty awful allergies, so I think that played a big part in my life in learning to love technology and future, you know, anything, all things futuristic and like sort of edge away from nature, outdoorsy stuff. And on top of that, you know, I grew up in New York and we had the Bronx Zoo, which is a fantastic zoo, and I know the Animal Kingdom's not a zoo, but growing up I've taken many trips to the Bronx Zoo, and so I feel like I've gotten my fill of seeing, you know, wildlife. So it's not the sort of thing I need to go do. That said, when I'm in Disney, I make a point to go to the Animal Kingdom. It's just, as some people will argue against that it's not, I treat it like a half-day park. You know, I go there for a half day, I hit up Everest, I go to Dinosaur, it's tough to be a bug, maybe the Kilimanjaro Safari, grab a bite, and then off to these parks, which I really enjoy a lot more. Next up is 84 Weber, who asks, my family might go to Disney around Christmas. Have you ever been down there during Christmas? And if so, did you like it? Oh, I sort of kind of answered this already, I guess. Yeah, I went like the day after Christmas for New Year's, and they still had this stuff up. I'll be honest, I really enjoyed New Year's. I really enjoyed a lot of these special events, but I enjoy Disney most when it's just Disney. I actually will usually avoid times when like it's Christmas or Halloween as much as possible, because while they do a fantastic job decorating the place, it's just not my cup of tea. I love Disney as it is, just plain vanilla Disney, you know, everything before it's set up with like Christmas decorations or Halloween decorations or Thanksgiving decorations. So I mean, I still enjoy it, right? It's Disney at the end of the day. That's a lesson I learned in my last trip, is that no matter what, it's still Disney. You're still gonna have fun, you know. I was voted against on where we stayed in our last trip. It was a group of friends, and we stayed at Fort Wilderness, and like I've just explained a few minutes ago, I'm not a fan of the Wilderness. And I was worried that like being at a hotel that I really just didn't care for was gonna like sour my trip, and it was such a silly fear to have, because of course it didn't sour my trip. It was Disney World. It was still fantastic, and I ended up liking that resort. It was the cabins at the Fort Wilderness campgrounds. Though I would not go to that if you're going on a shorter trip. There's an actual bus system within the resort to get to the buses, and that sort of adds to the time it takes to get anywhere. So if you're going for like 2-3 days, don't stay there. Going for a nice week-long or longer trip, feel free to stay there. The cabins are nice. It's quiet, and it's pretty great. They have some fantastic food there. Anyway, I'm rambling. Let's move on to the last question. Last question comes from Braden, who asks, "Hey Rob, I know what is now called the Tomorrowland Transit Authority was originally an idea for Walt's idea of Epcot. Do you know why it moved over to Tomorrowland in the Magic Kingdom instead of Future World and Epcot?" Well, great story. So he's talking about the TTA. It is the slow-moving sort of ride that gives you a tour around Tomorrowland, and it was indeed originally planned for Walt's version of Epcot, which was the city of the future, and he intended to use that as a transportation system for people who lived in the houses in the outer area of Epcot to get to the downtown area of Epcot where they could work and shop. Of course, Walt passed away. That Epcot never happened. And so what Roy and Disney as a company wanted to eventually do when they realized that, Epcot the city was not going to happen, is they wanted to take as many as Walt's ideas that they felt were still great ideas and implement them somewhere in Disney. So it ended up getting put into Tomorrowland. The reason it wasn't put in Future World and Epcot was because it was put into Tomorrowland far before Epcot was like a thing, Epcot, they dragged their feet with. You got to remember, Walt died in '69, so that means he was planning Epcot in the late '60s, and Epcot itself didn't open until the '80s. So there was a good amount of time there between, Walt's ideas and them actually breaking ground and doing anything. And so you see a lot of those ideas there. And maybe they could have put a TTA in, they could have put some sort of TTA in there. Uh-oh, how do I get out? I'm trapped. But they probably didn't want to have two of the same exact ride. Anyway, let's warp back out to Hollywood Studios. I want to thank everybody for your questions. They were all fantastic. If you have a question you want me to answer, feel free to leave it in the comments below. I try to get to as many of them as possible. Sometimes they're repeats or really short questions, in which case I'll try to get to them in the comments themselves. I want to thank everybody for watching. I hope everybody has a fantastic week. Whatever you're doing, make the most of it because it makes it so much better. And I hope to see you all here next time for the next episode of the Walt Disney Q&A. Bye, everybody.